Carson Beck in his 10th year of college football went out there and had a game-winning drive, and part of that's my fault. I said that I'd be very interested to see this drive from Carson Beck to win this football game, because I had multiple takes saying that if you put the game in Carson Beck's hands rather than the run game with Mark Flesher, then I think Miami loses the game. But he was in a situation where they had to depend on Carson Beck, and he ended up converting, and Trinidad came just short of a Hail Mary. But diving deep into this game, I guess there's a couple of key topics in terms of what the media has talked about. Number one being the Hail Mary pass, and if or not it was pass interference. And now I'm just the messenger here, and I have my own opinion on this. That being that, come on, what are we talking about? There's some hand grabbing on every Hail Mary. We're not calling some ticky-tack penalty to end the game to give Ole Miss another shot. I get it's entertainment, but it wasn't a foul, and I think most people know it, and they're just trying to. It's a cope mechanism, in my opinion.
Well, usually the rule analysts that always pop into the game, they always piss me off because I disagree with them, or it's always like a catch, and they're like, no, that's not a catch. And I'm like, it just reminds me of our Des Bryant 20 whatever, where it's like, that was a catch. We're just going by the book or whatever. But on this play, I actually liked what the rule analyst said, which is, it's mutual combat. Both of them were grabbing each other. It's a Hail Mary ball. It's the last play of the game. Nobody wants to see a flag there. Obviously, Ole Miss does, because they're on their last breath. I mean, the reality is the receiver was grabbing the cornerback was grabbing the receiver. It's a jump ball. It was thrown in the back of the end zone. I would argue that was an interesting throw. Most people say it was a good throw, but I really felt like it only gave one receiver a shot at the ball. The tight end was coming right underneath the receiver I can't even remember the receiver. I think it was Stribling that he threw it to. But,
I think so.
Mutual combat, I think, is a good way to explain it. It's like an umpire or a referee, whoever's on the sideline is not going to call that, because they're both, grabbing on each other, trying to get to the ball. And, a last ditch effort, I don't think that should have been called.
Jacob, do you agree with that?
Sorry, the baby was crying. Couldn't hear it all the way through here. But no, I agree with y'all. It wasn't as egregious to call it to me. I think the bigger issue would be it's obvious that calls are called differently in the fourth quarter than they are in the first quarter. So that would be the biggest issue right there. I do 100% agree with Ryan about the whole rules analyst coming up and speaking and whatnot. It's like, dude, it's like, we don't care. To me, it's like, we know what a pass interference is. We know what a holding is. We know what some of these calls are. I would rather see a rules analyst come out on something interesting that's like, oh my God, we've never seen this before, rather than Jim, both their hands are both. It's like, yeah, we can see that, bro. So
yeah,
that's the part that gets on it. It seems like they try to make the game more interesting. It's like, dude, we do not care.
We do not care. Yeah, and the second portion of this game, I think, needs to be evaluated. That really affected a lot like Oregon, but not in the same fashion. But it affected the offense. Was Kewen Lacey getting tied up with a hamstring injury? I believe it was a hamstring injury, and comes back out. And they're kind of just using, I would imagine, the Rebels are just kind of using Lacey as a decoy throughout that game. They weren't able to really establish. They were very pass heavy for the majority of this game. I know Lacey had that break-off touchdown. I believe that's when he got a little banged up, maybe pulled something on the run. And Jacob, you might attest to this. Somebody said when Lacey was running on that 75-yard touchdown, however long it was, that his strides look awfully familiar to somebody else that wore number 5 at a school with red, being Darren McFadden. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Running back comps, there's 1,000 of them. But yeah, so anyway, that's kind of how I saw the offense for Ole Miss. Is yes, they became one-dimensional, but it wasn't a lot like Oregon. It wasn't by choice, but in a different kind of choice. It was like, hey, our running back's down. He was one of our second best weapon on the team. Now Trinidad's going to have to carry us through the passing attack. And I thought Chambliss did really well. I thought he managed the game. He made great throws. He responded. He got him ahead of the game late. And then it just turned out to be whoever had the ball last with enough time was the winner in this one, and turned out to be Miami. But on the flip side of that, I know Kewen Lacey getting hurt. On the flip side of that, you look at what I said last week in the previous episode, talking about Ole Miss has a top 60 run defense in the nation. And if Miami was going to win this game, they're going to have to depend heavily on Mark Fletcher. Oh, Mark Fletcher, 22 attempts, 133 yards, averaging 6 yards per carry. I mean, they bullied Ole Miss at the line of scrimmage. And I think that was ultimate differentiating factor with Miami winning. And I'll get into a different question from that that'll branch off towards the end that I think is pretty interesting. But when you guys look at this game, Ryan, when you watched it, what did you see from Ole Miss's game plan versus Miami's approach, especially late in the game?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with Ole Miss. I think, for one, Trinidad Chambliss is a phenomenal quarterback. I would argue that he's top 3 or 4 in college football, and his waiver got declined, so he's going to have to go in the NFL, and he'll get drafted, and he'll have a shot somewhere where I think if he gets a shot, he could be pretty good in the NFL. I mean, I don't know how good, because his style of play reminds me a lot of like a Kyler Murray, where he can move and throw. But yeah, the guy's got ice in his veins. That's his second. Just to jog everybody's memory, he went down and scored with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left in the fourth and took the lead. And going to how Ole Miss wanted to play this game, at the beginning it was really rough. They couldn't get the ball moving. And then Kewan Lacey finally broke free and had that long touchdown that he got injured on. But after that, to Jared's point, where they were having Lacey out on the field, one of the things I said was they're just having him out there for a decoy. They don't trust the backup running back, who's been really good for them as well. I think it's Diggs is his name, but he only had four carries for 10 yards. So they kept Lacey out there, and you could tell that he wasn't full go, and they started using him in the fourth quarter a little bit more. But the game plan for Ole Miss to me was obvious. They were playing lateral a lot and getting quick throws out, and it was to take away the pass rush of Bain and that other guy. I mean, Bain only had 1 tackle and 0 sacks, so the game plan for them was to keep the pressure off of Trinidad. But yeah, I was very impressed with Ole Miss. Everybody knows the story of what's been going on at Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin leaving, Pete Golden taking over, and what are they going to be next year? And, they performed really well. They beat Georgia, and then they came in this game and were inches away from winning it right there at the end. And then to flip to Miami, I'll keep this short and sweet because I think Jared's right. I mean, they owned time of possession in this game. I think it was north of 30-something minutes, and that's a lot of time of possession. I think they ran 85-plus plays on offense, and that goes to what Jared said, and their play style was to lean on the run, and they did heavily. And I think that's what, we'll go back to what we said the first 5 weeks of college football, which was we all were complimenting how Miami was the best team in the nation, the best defense. They were talented all over the field on offense between Fletcher and Tony. And I mean, Carson Beck, I know he's been playing for a long time, but he did enough, early on in the season to be like, Miami's the best looking team. Well, they went through those stints in the regular season where they would like play Louisville on Friday night and lose, or they would, I forget who their other loss was, but in those SMU. 2 games, SMU, in those 2 games that they lost, Carson Beck threw for 7 interceptions. So I think what you saw and what you've seen in the playoffs is they've kind of found out throughout the year where to be and how to do it. So they're not relying on Carson Beck's arm. They're relying on the run game to open up and asking Beck to make plays on third down. And, that last drive, he made multiple throws on third down that got them down the field and scored. And then he ultimately ran it in for the lead. So Miami's a good team. And, going to the other side of the bracket, if I'm Indiana, I'd much rather have played Ole Miss because Miami is a complete team. They definitely have all of the keys that you need to be successful. And I think in this game that really showed, they kind of honed in and took control of the game, and they didn't flinch when Ole Miss went down and scored in those last couple minutes. So I said early on, when I was on this podcast, that I thought Miami was the most complete team. They had their little stints, like I'm saying, but, they looked really good against Ohio State. And then, they had a defensive battle against A&M, and most people didn't think they were going to be here. Or, they barely made the college football playoff by other people's standards, but, they've come out and they've shown that they can compete. And it's really interesting because they're in the ACC. So that was why everybody was,
that was my branch off question, was ACC.
Questioning
we'll
them.
get to that
So,
in a second.
But that's what I would add is Miami. This is the last team I was going to pick to be in the final. Like I thought Georgia, if they ever got to play Georgia, I thought Georgia would rout them. I honestly thought Ohio State was going to give them a run for their money, but they've come out and they've stomped pretty heavily. So they've for the most part in this game, they were in control. So yeah, I mean, hats off to them. They were. I mean, they're the 10th seed in the playoff, and they're in the championship.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Jacob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this. I agree with Ryan a lot on that, and I think it's a testament to Miami figuring out how to play and how to use Carson Beck, and yes, he made the plays he needed to make, and he handled everything well. But they still didn't ask him to do too much. I think if they have to do that, it may have looked different. And then, just like Ryan said, big shout out to Trinidad Chambliss, because it's 2 games in a row. Really, if you think about it, it was D2 guy or FCS guy came in, was going to be a backup. Their starter got hurt, and this is with Lane Kiffin at the helm. He took the starting position, and I mean, you don't see it very often and you really don't see it nowadays, where when a backup has to fill in or whatever, that he keeps the role. And he played so well that they were like, yeah, this dude's staying.
Yeah.
And he did that all year, got him to that point in the playoffs, 2 games in a row where it was essentially a Trinidad Chambliss game, and he showed out. He did well, and so I mean, it's just props to Ole Miss for fighting right there. Now, I don't think it looks very good that the interim head coach, his side of the ball got ravaged, and it's kind of how it's been a little bit of the year, outside of sometimes the defensive rush aspect of it, but I mean, this was a typical Lane Kiffin Ole Miss a Lane Kiffin defense, to where
Yeah, and
you could
it's
see
his recruited defense too.
Yeah, you could see all the studs on offense, and then on defense, it's like, oh, you got some guys, and then they 2 games in a row. I mean, what have they given up the last 2 games?
A lot
34 and 31. So it's like, yeah, plays a good team, puts up points. So, but overall, this is a phenomenal game to watch.